Welcome to Hangin Halfhill, the leading podcast in reopening the Dark Portal. Today, I'm joined by my wonderful co-host Jay and a guest, Khono Chronos, also known as that Rexar guy from Twitter. Say hi, Khono.
Hello there.
Jay?
Oh, hi, I'm here too.
Yeah. I know the Horde scares you. It's okay.
No, I thought
We
we
can
could
make
just
it
let
through
you
this
do
one.
this whole thing. Like, just take this. Let's just the sixth podcast today.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Well, I am going to need you here as a support co-host because the Horde scares me. I
Oh,
think we
okay.
have established that. You know, as I've said on the podcast repeatedly, the thing that keeps me up at night, just afraid, is that one day Horde Twitter will be mad at me. And if they have a ringleader, it would be Khono here.
We're coming for you for all the troll comments, definitely.
It's true. And bullying U6 is incredibly fun, so I cannot promise you your safety. I may turn sides.
Welcome to the Horde.
Look, you know, I remember when I first got into making videos, I just like, you know, I'm not a big faction guy. I just don't really. I think it's kind of evident because of like I really got locked in on lore with Legion, so I'm just not a big faction guy. But I would just make videos about what I cared about, and I got a comment once that was just like, "This channel's way too alliance biased." And as any like new YouTuber will do, you will now shift your entire content strategy around the first critique you get. And so I immediately made a video entirely about the Horde just to balance things out. And then after that, it says, oh man, maybe I am just an alliance guy because I didn't like making that video.
Damn.
It's not even like I love the story. Like I think the Horde is the like narratively they're much better than the alliance. It's just an aesthetics thing. Like when I'm choosing like backgrounds for shots and things, I always end up in Coultiers just because I like how it looks the most.
I mean, Coultiers is beautiful. I'll give you that. Like, but I'm also a BFA stan, so you know, that'll go well. I mean, I just really like I've liked the Horde since like day one, like Reign of Chaos. Like the moment I started playing that, I was like, ooh, I like these guys.
I have just like this weird just aversion to the Horde out of spite. Just because when I first started playing the game, my friends were like, hey, make an Orc be Master Hunter because we're going to do PvP. Because all back in the day, like all the good PvPers were on Horde or whatever. Or at least my friends thought so. And so I was like forced to play the Horde when like I wanted to make an Alliance character. And I also didn't want to do PvP. I wanted to do raiding. And so now I am a big raider and I'm also on Alliance. And for there was like a between now and then there was like this whole period where like I despised the Horde in PvP because I was forced to be there for a while. And now I've grown to just kind of like them on their own. Like now I PvP for fun sometimes, and you know, even thinking of making a Tauren warrior soon.
Ooh.
But you know, it was like BFA where it like really peaked because I was also Mythic raiding at the time, and Mythic raiding also forced you to be Horde because the Horde was just better for Mythic raiding. And I hated Zandalari aesthetics. Hated it. Like I was in the stupid pyramid city and all I could think about was how all the Alliance players got to hang out in Borealis. And I was like, oh my God. And so like I ended up quitting BFA over this. I just hated it. And you know, my problem isn't that it exists. You know, to each their own. It was that I was forced to engage with something while I could just see across the river that everyone else was getting all this cool Coultiers stuff.
I think that's fair, being forced to play something. That sounds awful. Like, I mean, I love the pyramids and I love the Zandalari aesthetics, so you know. There is some roughness going on there, but like I can respect the Borealis enjoyment. Again, I really like Battle for Azeroth, so there is that.
Well, I think that I'm interesting because I get to play sort of the enlightened faction centrist here because
My God.
I started in TBC as Alliance, and I was like, for the first few expansions that I played, I was like the most obnoxious, toxic Alliance fanboy in the world. And I think it was around Legion that I started to pay more attention to the Horde, and I made some Horde alts and just kind of dicked around with the Horde a lot. And I realized, like, for me as a person, my two favorite aesthetics in fantasy is like light, holy, angelic paladin shit, and I'm very naturey IRL, so like also like naturey, shamanistic, you know, spiritual animals and plants and everything. And that's when I kind of realized, like, hold the fuck on. Alliance covers one of those bases, and Horde absolutely covers another one. And I think, like, for me, there are aspects of the Horde that I, to this day, fucking hate. And that's all I focused on, and I lost sort of the cool, shaman-y, earthy vibes. And so now I love both. And so I can be the mediator. I'm still, sorry, I'm still kind of an Alliance fanboy at my heart, but I do love the Horde, too.
I mean, I like both too. It's just that I lean more over towards the other, and I like that a lot.
For the purposes of this podcast, you have to be absolutely Horde brain.
Okay, so I need to go back into my 2010 mindset. Got it. All right.
Right. Yeah, we got to get toxic, I guess.
All right.
Because that's what the leading podcast and being toxic. I guess.
Varian is a bunch of ashes. So.
Too toxic. We went too far.
I went too far. Okay. See, you asked me to be toxic, and that's immediately where I go.
It's true. Yeah, just right off the bat, way too hard.
There was an era there on Twitter. Anytime someone would show like a cutscene or something, they're like, "Man, I wish Varian was here for this." I would just always, 100% of the time, reply, "He's there. He's in the background. You see those clouds?"
I remember that. I do that every time when Garrosh gets mentioned. I just post the one Sanctum of Domination image of him being ashes. So
he's there. What's funny is like talking about like Horde versus Alliance. It's just an aesthetics thing for me. Like I just like the Alliance aesthetics. If I had to say like a story, bro, the Horde's the main character. I don't care what anyone says. The Horde just have like actual, like well-written origins and reasons to exist, and the Alliance just exists as a foil to them.
I'll take it. I'll take it, you know?
Like the Alliance exists as like the baseline fantasy faction, and then the Horde is the counterpoint, like the actual like thing that Warcraft is like saying. Right. So the Alliance is like just boring because they have to exist in order to provide a foil to the Horde.
Well, the Alliance is reactive, whereas the Horde was proactive in terms of how this whole thing started. You know, the Alliance was just kind of vibing, living life.
Well, the Horde is the whole thing is that they're the survivors. They're like the war-torn people. And in order for that to be a thing, there needs to be a faction to do a war to them, you know, to inflict things upon them. And that's why the Alliance exists, you know?
I do want more stories where the Alliance starts this shit, you know? Like, way more of that. Because we have not...
Okay, well, never mind about that, because I also want to just put my foot down.
Okay.
I'm done with faction stuff. I hate it. I hate all of it now. It's cool as lore that used to exist, but post BFA, I want to never see a faction war again.
Oh, well, it is funny, because, like, when I say I want faction stuff, I'm not saying I want the Horde and the Alliance to go ham. I want them to butcher each other. I want this to go 5th War, 6th War, 7th War. No, I kind of just want more moments like the Wrathgate, where it's them fighting side by side and joking with each other and having a laugh, and then somebody dies a few minutes later. That's what I want, you know. Except it not being Dranosh. Let's not have another Dranosh die. That was kind of depressing. But that's what I want. I want the Alliance.
You can tell
what.
You can tell you're a Horde guy because you said someone died at the Wrathgate, and then you said Dranosh.
The average
fan would not say Dranosh was the guy that died at Wrathgate.
I think some other dude died there. Some inconsequential person died.
If I ever said, you remember that guy that died at the Wrathgate? No one would say Dranosh Sour Fang.
Damn.
Most people don't even know who that is.
That's a crime, frankly, but...
They pointed out in the Shattering book. What do you want from me? That's like the whole like reason why Garrosh was even allowed to exist and do what he did. But no one really brings that up. They're just like, Thrall picks the one racist guy. Cool.
Thrall made a series of bad choices at that time in his life, because that was also shortly after that was when the goblins got rolled into the Horde, and he was like, Gallywix, you can keep your position.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like,
I know no one would appreciate this bit, but I hope Thrall being bad at picking leaders is like a reoccurring bit, the same way that like Dreadlord's Dreadlord or Kel'Thuzad is always a raid boss, or Tempest Keep being really a setback. Like, I hope in the future there's just a bit where like, let's say we need to like pick a new leader for the Earth and whatever, and Thrall just immediately goes, let's pick a Kobold. Everyone goes, Thrall, no.
Thrall steps up and he's like, I will decide, and everyone else is like, no, Thrall, maybe take a seat on this one. We got this.
You're a great guy, Thrall. This is not your strong suit.
It's funny because like the next time he ever picked a leader was Gazlo, so It's a little ironic. It's a little ironic, but you know, it happens.
Well, didn't you really pick Gaslow? Gaslow was just he just picks the first guy in front of him. That's his problem.
I think he had his reasons to pick Gaslow. You know, Gaslow's a stand-up guy. He helped build Orgrimmar. He supports unions. Like, yeah, Gaslow's a good pick. I mean,
but he is quite literally just the first guy Thrall saw.
Oh, I mean, true.
The only goblin that Thrall knew.
Fair. And like Gaslow's just like, yeah, I'll leave the other cartel that I'm in. I'll be a part of the Bilgewater and I'll lead them. Like, that was pretty instantaneous, but hey.
That'd be a funny machinima. It's just that like fucking Thrall's at his desk just doing some managerial work, and then he's like, I need to pick a new war chief. And then Garrosh comes in, it's like, hey man, I'm about to get some takeout. You want any? He's like, you should do it.
Garrosh, buddy.
And it's like, and the goblins need a leader. And Galliwick says, hey, can I tag along? And he's like, oh man, this is just a good day. This is working out.
You just have Vol'jin in the corner lifting up his finger going,
It makes me so sad that like we never got to see non-orc war chiefs like really be a thing.
Yeah, well, we had Sylvanas, but
well, like none of the non-orc war chiefs were ever war chief for very long.
You had Sylvanas for like
they never even got to really do war chief things.
I think Sylvanas was the most war chief we got besides Garrosh, if we're talking like war or whatever. But
yeah, but pretty much from off the bat, you knew you were gonna kill her.
There was some debate with there,
you know, like,
but
you can't like
I don't know. There was a divide there.
It was like after Lordaeron, it was basically like, oh, okay.
It was more after Teldrassil than Lordaeron, if I'm being honest. But yeah.
Well, you don't know. Like, it was like basically at the point. Well, I'm not saying like when you like decided she was bad. Is when we like knew that the whole point of the story was we were eventually going to take.
Yeah,
her, you know?
I guess that's fair.
Like she's no longer your war chief. She's the bad guy.
I don't know. I think the moment that Saurfang was like, "There's no honor in this. They will come for us now, all of them," and it's just Sylvanas smiling in the corner there. It's like, okay,
yeah,
she's probably gonna be the baddie, and then she never was. But you know, it's took an expansion. It's fine.
Actually, this does bring up something I've always wanted to talk about. Vol'jin, like quote unquote, still being around.
Yeah.
Vol'jin dying in Legion, I will say, is like top 5 like fumbles.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
the setting.
That might be number 1 fumble for me, but yes.
I don't want to like interject anything or make up something, but I do think that the reason Vol'jin died was just because Blizzard believed if you kill one faction leader, you need to even it out. Like, the way Bolvar died, and so they're like, I guess we're killing Dranosh,
So with Bolvar, I remember the interviews, they said that we want to do something cool with Bolvar, and I remember that they said something along the lines of, because I don't think they had the plans to make him the Lich King yet, but I know that they were like, okay, he's kind of caught between life and death, or we're to do something cool. I forget what it was. It was so long ago when they did the interview with that, but with Vol'jin, this is where I'll interject, and I don't know how believable this is, because it came from MMO Champion, and it's iffy with that, but like, at the time, there was data mined stuff from the alpha that Vol'jin was going to survive, and he was going to recruit new allies, and like, at the time, people were like, oh, he's going to recruit the Zandalari, and like, now that we know what was after Legion, it was Battle for Azeroth, I wonder if that was the original pitch, that he was going to, go out to recruit the Zandalari, bring them into the Horde, and blah, 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 and then regain his title as War Chief. He was basically going to fake his death, because he does that a lot.
Isn't there like, I'm kind of speaking out of my league because I skipped BFA, but isn't there a reason to believe that he's going to be coming back as like a Loa?
Yeah.
Perhaps like the Loa of Kings?
Yeah.
He is a Loa?
Well, he's going, in Ardenwield's questline, you get to team up with Vol'jin, and when you team up with Vol'jin, you go to save some Loa in the Maw that Zul sent to the Maw, and one of them was Razan, and Razan basically gifts him the remaining essence that he has left in him to Vol'jin, and Vol'jin basically takes Razan's essence and can be reborn into a Loa, and that's what happens at the end of that questline. So Vol'jin will...
Okay, so he's the Loa of Kings in the same way that Farok is the Fire Lord. Like, maybe, but it's kind of off-screen right now.
So this kind of gets to the crux of what I wanted to say here with Vol'jin. is that I know a lot of people are really hoping for Vol'jin to come back and become the Loa Kings. I personally hope he doesn't.
Oh,
I hope that's where Vol'jin's stories end, and like we're like he's left in that gray area. Because I do think that like while the Broken Shore killing Vol'jin is a massive fumble, it is worse to the setting to try and like undo that in some way.
really?
You know? Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's better for just like because like imagine Vol'jin comes back that just does weird things for the Darkspear, you know?
Well, okay.
Or the Horde in general.
I don't
I
think.
disagree and I agree. I disagree because I think that it would be a good way to reincorporate him into the story again, sort of redeem the fact that he was taken from us too soon. I agree if what you're saying is you're envisioning it like Vol'jin comes back and is like a regular main player in the narrative. That shouldn't happen. Like, he died, that it is what it is. But having him come back and like show up about as frequently as like Bwansamdi does or something like that, where it's like we know he's a known variable and entity in the setting, but he's not like an active player, you know. I think that would work because that gives us a resolution, but it doesn't undo sort of the tragedy of the Broken Shore.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you had like pre-Zandalari, well, like pre-BFA Loa, where like they were like more vague, versus like in BFA, like Zandalari became like literal animals that are just hanging around. So like if he becomes the Loa of Kings, that means he's like walking around. He's just
Okay,
here.
yeah, that's fair.
I want like the Darkspear to have like altars to the Loa of Kings and its Vol'jin, and like his essence maybe like grants them blessings. Give us like Darkspear paladins or
So
some
you
shit,
don't
the
want
way
him to
that,
be
like,
an actual
the
character.
Zandalari
You just
paladin.
want him to be a force or an entity or
like a force, like a vague being, you know.
like kind of like how
yeah.
a loon is for us right now.
I never want him walking around while we're fighting Xal'atath, you know.
Well, I think that Vol'jin will become a Loa in the same way that Bwansamdi is a Loa. Like, I don't think he's going to replace Rokan as an example. Like, I don't think Rokan's just suddenly going to be like, "Oh, you're back and you're a god now. You should be the chieftain again." I think that Vol'jin will, for one, go, "No, you're alive. I'm not alive. Technically, I'm a god now." I think that it'll be more like a reflection of Bwansamdi in a way, where he's like a living Loa who probably answers to Talanji and answers to Rokan. I like the idea of him being the Loa of Chieftains, not the Loa of Kings, because Bwansamdi is supposed to be the Loa of Kings now after the arrangement with Rastakhan, and Talanji honors that in the Shadows Rising book. He's like, "Nah, you can still be the Loa of Kings. I'm not gonna strip that from you." And Bwansamdi's all giddy and happy about that. So I think that Bwansamdi's going to remain the Loa of Graves and Kings, and Vol'jin's going to be something a bit separate. And they could tackle that story in Midnight with like troll shit going on with the Amani, or
yeah, because like Razan is the Loa of like, you know, kingliness, you know, royalty, or you know, like the way that Zandalari paladins are like Razan paladins.
Well, they're supposed to be. I mean, they can be whatever. Like, that's kind of what they do afterwards with the paladins. They're like, "Oh, we lost Razan. We don't have a Loa Kings anymore. We need to worship another Loa that gives us the light," which works, apparently.
Yeah, so that's why I would love it. I don't think Vol'jin should have like a speaking active role in the story, but he should become like a cornerstone of Darkspear culture. Of like, here's like our most legendary hero. Here's like, we have altars to him, and we have like, you know, like I said, like I think Darkspear Paladin should be a thing, and they're like Vol'jin worshippers.
I think that he should still be a character personally, but like not used all the time, like what Jay said. Like, I feel like I feel like basically he's such a loose Loa, or like a reborn Loa, or something happens where like he can't like channel himself all the time, and he's like busy with something. I don't something where like they give her an excuse on why he just can't come back all the time and do shit. Because like I feel like they kind of wrote themselves into a corner with like a character like Cenarius, who was killed in Warcraft 3 and then came back, and then everyone was asking, "Oh, where is he in the War of Thorns? Why isn't he helping the Night Elves? Why isn't he doing this? Why isn't he doing that?" And I feel like they need to give her an explanation for that sort of thing if they do those types of characters then. So like, just bring him back, let him, you know, because like I do think that they did kind of piss on his legacy in a way where it was, and they realized that. That's why they brought him back so instantly. Like, I remember it was the Legion BlizzCon when we first got that. They outright said, "Yeah, Vol'jin's story's not done. We're not killing him off permanently." They already were on that tangent, so
I think I just have a general aversion to resurrection of characters. Like when things get a little too comic booky. You know how like comic books, the whole bit is like no one ever actually stays dead. It's like Vol'jin did die. He should stay very firmly dead. And for that, like, while he is like resurrected as a Loa in a way, I do think he should still in the story be a dead character. Like his death should be like an extremely impactful thing where he like it's not like, oh, I died, but then I got better.
I mean, it still was. It affected.
That's why I don't think he should be walking around. Like he can speak to people as like as a spirit or whatever, but you know, I should never be like in a raid or a dungeon or something and like, you know, Rokon and Vol'jin are teaming up to fight something. It's like, what?
I don't
No,
know
go
if I
away.
agree. I
You're
don't know
dead.
if
I watched you die.
I don't know if I agree with that, but like, I think that there's a place for him in the story. It just needs to make sense, and they can't just like again have him appear all the time. I do think that it depends on what type of character it is and like what type of entity it is. Like, obviously they can't do this all the time. Like, for example, this is like a good example on why I'm glad in a way that Vol'jin died and not like say Thrall or something. Because like the thing was that if Thrall had died on the Broken Shore, that would have been it for his character. And it would have been, and like if they did it right, I guess it could have been like Varian type of level. It would have been like, oh, this is amazing. But like, let's say they did the same thing that they did with Vol'jin, and Thrall just gets one-shotted, and that's the legacy that they kind of endure, and they can't bring him back. Like Thrall can't just become a god. That's not the type of story that they usually tell with trolls and Loa and all that stuff. But like, I believe that they even hinted that Vol'jin could become a Loa all the way back when his father was just chilling with Bonsomdi in the afterlife in like his short story during Cataclysm. So like I feel like they already had plans to make Vol'jin a Loa to some degree, all the way back in Kata, which is nuts if that's true. But yeah, I think that on some level it's believable and you can do it, just you can't overdo it. Like Vol'jin, I think, is a rare case where they're doing it. I don't think that they've done that really ever outside of undead characters, necromancy or whatever, or death knights. Like they did it with Nazgrim, and like
you actually you just mentioned like what if Thrall died at the Broken Shore, and I'm sure you know me well enough. That's got me chomping at the bit to talk about one other thing, and that's I am on team Thrall should die in the next 3 expansions. Like I think Thrall should die in the last Titan.
Yeah, sorry, I agree.
I'm on the team that I think this era of Warcraft storytelling should end with the death of Thrall.
Yeah, I think it would be very poetic in a way, and I think it would be reflective of turning a new page and starting a new chapter. I can already hear the arguments of, well, maybe Anduin should die too, which I oppose with every fiber of my being, but I'm an Anduin simp, so what are you going to do? But I do think that, I mean, Thrall has been with us since Warcraft 3. If this is sort of the conclusion of all the major plot points that we know of right now and starting a new chapter, a new threat, like, I don't know what other story Thrall has to tell after this also, and that's an issue that fiction has a lot, is keeping a character around longer than their story, and I think his story has been told, or it's nearing, the conclusion, and we have his children now. So
let me so like if I feel like this is important to kind of preface this with, if I had to say my perfect 14.0, so the expansion after the World Soul Saga, it would be a revamp of the old world where the kid characters just it's like Classic 2. Like we're just going through all the zones, doing little zone specific stories and zone specific raids. But instead it's with Daegrin and oh god, what's Thrall's son's name?
Durek?
Yeah, Durek, Daegrin, Anduin, Tess Greymane. Like the new kids on the block, And like we establish their roles in a new Azeroth. And I hope that like all the older characters that are like from Warcraft 3 or whatever, like, Tyrande, Malfurion, Thrall, they can still be alive. I just want them to like be done.
They
like Toronto and Malfurion are basically done.
Yeah,
They
I was
clocked
gonna
out.
say a lot of the alliance leaders that they choose retirement. That's what they've recently done in Dragonflight. Out of like they did that with Gen, they did that with Tyrande, they did it with Malfurion. Horde characters typically don't do that though, which is probably why you're pushing the Thrall needs to die button. I assume.
I think Thrall is just a very death coded character, especially considering his first major thing he did in War Within was the Arathi, the Stromgarde short story, and that story very much hinted towards him dying. Like if I was going to tell a grand arc where a character would die, that is how I would start it. The whole bit where he's like poisoned and walking and he's imagining all of his old soldiers he used to lead all dining and being happy and like just begging him to come join them in the afterlife. It's like, oh, this is a story you tell for a character that is in their final chapter.
They also had him like keep going, like don't give up too.
Yeah, because he's not done yet. He's not, but he is very much someone who's like, his time is over, like he's nostalgic for the past when he was like the young chieftain guiding his people, but he's like done.
But
he's got one more in him,
I'm heel turning right now. He should not die. Sorry, I'm on your side.
You're on my side now?
He should not die. He should not die, and here's why. For a meta reason. There are at least 2 generations of gamers playing World of Warcraft right now. 6, you are the younger generation. I am the older generation. Anduin is you, but Thrall is me. And we can see, like, the way, when I look at Anduin, I see a young man who has grown up, and I've got to watch him grow. But for Thrall, what I see is a man who began this journey young and youthful and in his prime, and now he looks in the mirror, and he's old. And he's getting older, and he has to find out what that means. And his story is not over. And maybe there are things that are within him saying that his story is over. But that's not how life works. Life is a continuing journey into old age. And I think not only just for me personally and people my age, but also like as a reflection of Metzen, who, you look at Metzen now and it's like, that motherfucker's getting old, and it's like, but he's still got so much fire and so much creativity and he's bringing so much passion to this. Like Thrall is emblematic of the older generation of people playing the game. And I think it would be a disservice to kill him off. Now, to have him step back and be like a mentor to the younger characters, I think that's fantastic. And I think that's also reflective of the generational split, where it's like, I'm not really in the spotlight anymore, and I'm cool with that. Like, now my role is to guide others, to guide Anduin, to guide Durak. I think that in that way, it would be a disservice to the character and to us if he died. So yes, he should live.
Okay, but how about I change your mind though?
You won't, but go ahead.
Okay, imagine the end of Last Titan. We take out Sargeras, and we get a recreation once again of the Manaroth Chromas shot, but it's Sargeras and Thrall.
Well, Sargeras isn't going to be a villain, so you're already operating on faulty logic.
Yep, okay, never mind. Throw it out. I give up. Okay, Thrall gets to live. You guys
I didn't get to say anything.
You did nothing and won.
I mean, I agree with what a lot you just said, Jay. I also think, though, that you could still do stories where he is front and center and still doing shit. I mean, I personally really think that, again, this is just the orc me coming out here and coming out to talk about orc stuff. One of the things I always really wanted after the Koshharg was Thrall taking on the title, finally, of the Lord of the Clans, which is basically just, the War Chief title, but instead of leading the entire Horde, it's leading all of the orcs, which is something I've always really wanted Thrall to do, and it's something I think that he should do next, as far as, like, the next chapter of his story. It's not really that different from what he already does, really. He basically already does it, but it would finally, he would finally acknowledge that. But I do like the idea of him being a mentor. That's kind of like, I think, the perfect role to do with Thrall, and ever since the War Within cinematic, that's like the perfect thing to do between him and Anduin. And like, I love that moment between him and Anduin at the end, where it's like the aftermath after they just fought the Nerubians, and like they talk about his father, and like Thrall like even tells Anduin like, your father was a really cool dude. He had my respect. And it's like a really nice moment between the two, and I want more of this. And I feel like Thrall, as much as like the community is very divided on this. I'm probably going to be the most outspoken when it comes to this, but like, I don't think Thrall's used enough. Like, he's used, but like, he's not used enough remotely as he used to. And I think that, especially speaking from me, we just got Thrall back in Battle for Azeroth as like an orc leader. And again, I'm gonna stand on my podium here. Please stop killing our orc leaders. We keep losing them every time they become relevant. We lost Sarfang, we lost Garrosh, and like, yeah, that's a good thing. But
I think you guys should just start to own it.
like, I don't want to lose anymore. And like,
it's a point of pride.
Dirac is like only 12, I think 11 actually. And like, if you do,
what's weird in lore is that means he's fully grown. Which is like the weirdest lore, like
orcs
fun
are
fact,
weird.
Is that orcs are just full grown men by 12, which I think should be retconned, but it currently isn't.
It probably should be retconned. But like, I just think that it's way too soon for like, basically for Dirac to stand up and slowly grow in his arc. I don't think Thrall needs to die. I think that needs to be more like Varian and Anduin's situation, where like you have like this very long storyline. Like, I'm talking like 5 expansions from now, really. Not like...
Oh, man, you know what fucking slap?
What?
You give us a recreation of, like, a sort of, like, run back on the Thrall-Garrosh dynamic in Northrend, but in the last tie-in with Thrall and Dirac, and he gets to learn from the lessons of Garrosh.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, fashion him into the orc leader.
Like, you could do that without killing Thrall off, though. Like, that's what I want. Like,
yeah.
Well, I'm not saying kill him anymore. I'm saying is that I would love if, like, while we're in Northrend, Thrall gets all like nostalgic for when he was,
oh, that would be a great
Garrosh,
cinematic.
Like, got Dirac with him.
You know what would be really like? I think what would be kind of interesting is like Dirac does something that disappoints Thrall, and he starts to say, "You disappoint me." Like Dirac did something really bad, but like he catches himself and like he like reflects on why that disappointed him, and like he tells Dirac why, and like Dirac learns from that. Because like I think as much as I love the Thrall and Garrosh dynamic, and it was so good. I think that the main reason why it failed, like why Garrosh failed, is because like Thrall never like circled back and told Garrosh like, this is why you don't do this shit. Like he just was like, he kind of was like, he told him in the Icecrown Citadel, the Argent Tournament grounds, like, I will not let you repeat this, Garrosh. And Garrosh is like, fuck you, Thrall. But typical Garrosh behavior.
I just remember like Anduin as a character like became a character in really MoP.
Yeah.
Know? And I think Dirac, by the time of last time, it'll be like due for him to get that kind of
role. Yeah.
I agree.
That's I think that's what they need to do. Like Mista Pandaria, what I really liked about it was like they did stuff with Anduin, but they also did stuff with Varian. I want them that with Thrall and Dirac. Like Dirac needs to kind of like get his own character, especially like because they left it very open with the Koshharg of like what class is Dirac going to be. Now I want him to be a warrior and a hunter because that's just what lore characters are. They're usually like 2 classes. But it would be a nice reflection of what his grandpappy is, which is Duratan, which is a warrior and a hunter, and also Rexar. But let's I'll try not to get my Rexarisms too much in here.
Well, I just imagine that like 14.0 is going to be like the way that we talk about how Thrall is this generation of Warcraft player and Anduin is like mine.
Uh-huh.
I hope that 14.0 is like that start of like the next generation of Warcraft player, especially because like I think 14.0 will just be this clean slate of the story and they're going to need their character. And I think Dirac is prime target for a new player getting into the game, and they're going to have this brand new character whose lore background is like digestible enough and not as deep the same way that, when I started the game, Anduin had like pretty, like he had small backstory. I could read it in like 3 sentences and then I could just follow his story from there. And now I know all of it. Those new players in 14.0 are going to need that character. And I think Dirac is like,
I think oh, go ahead.
The cool like thing about this and not killing off the older characters is that like you're putting them on a shelf, but being on a shelf, the cool thing about being on a shelf is that when you get taken off the shelf and used, it's a special thing. And so like having Thrall there as like, maybe he is the Lord of Clans, maybe he is the war chief, but he's like, look, I'm an old man. I'm going to be doing administrative duties and diplomatic duties. Going out adventuring and solving problems is a young man's game. I'll leave that to Dirac and the younger generation. But then every once in a while, Thrall needs to whip out the Doomhammer and be like, it's time to fucking put down the law, and like, yes, it's going to be a fan service moment for, the older WoW players, but there's nothing wrong with fan service. Like,
Oh
we
yeah.
all want that, and having it show up kind of like infrequently like that, it'll be one of those like cutscenes that everyone, like that YouTubers do reacts to and get tens of thousands of views, right? Like, it's those big special moments, and I think I think that we should do that.
Actually, you know why Thrall can't die is because they still haven't like fixed this whole elemental dysfunction thing.
True.
I mean, I'm
True.
still waiting for that to happen, and I'm waiting for him to like go. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Avatar: The Last Airbender, but this man go Avatar state on his Alatath or something.
yeah.
Like the rock hitting him just the right spot in his back, and he just is
Well, he
like,
does
"God, I can
have
do it
he
all
does
again."
have a scar on his back on his new model since Shadowlands.
Oh my god, they're not doing the Avatar.
They're
thing.
not, but
But,
it's funny you bring that up.
I love Metzen so much because he so clearly came back into the BlizzCon office and he's like, "Hey, remember like Thrall's elemental dysfunction?" Everyone's like, "Yeah, we like resolved that in Shadowlands." And he says, "No, you didn't." He's like, "No, we did that. That was like a whole thing." He's like, "Nah."
I think he wants.
That's my story.
Yeah,
I
he
get to
wants.
tell
I
it.
think he wants to tell that story in his own way, which like Shadowlands kind of just is like, I'm gonna shoot lightning at this Mossworn guy. I got my elemental powers back. It was very like it wasn't like a fan service moment. It was just like a, oh yeah, he's got his powers back moment. Like it wasn't really like amazing cinematic moment.
Yeah, it's not the right place. It wasn't his story, and I think that like it deserves to be his story in order for that to happen. It was just like an incidental thing that happened in like Anduin and Sylvanas' story. It's like,
I just think it's so funny to imagine like the end of War Within, like the leveling campaign, and everyone's like, "Yeah, I lost my connection to my light because of like all the emotional turmoil." And Thrall's like, "Yeah, ain't it a bitch?" He's like, "But I managed to work through it, and now I'm back." And Thrall says, "Man, what the fuck?"
The funny thing was like when they did like the whole like War Within cinematic and like Thrall was talking to Anduin about like, their similar. That's what I liked about the War Within cinematic was like there was a lot of their similarities basically. And I thought like they were like, oh well, Thrall's been past this. He got his powers back, he got his mojo back. That's why he's telling Anduin, "You'll get it back." And then the Xalatath cinematic where she's lusting after everybody and going like, "Oh man, your power is gonna be mine."
The Warriors Within. Yeah.
What was that?
That's the name of the trailer, The Warriors Within, as a viewer note.
Oh, okay, I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry. Yeah, that cinematic, specifically, they just had Thrall get really angry and upset that he couldn't use the elements, and I remember seeing that and I was like, oh no, they're doing it again. But if they do it in like a really grandiose way where he just goes full Avatar state and like kicks ass while doing it, I'm okay with it. Like let's go.
Bro, give me Thragar, Thrallgar. Turn him into rocks. Like we meet the World Soul, and the World Soul's like, "Oh, that's my main bitch right there. What's up, Thrall?" And he's like, hi." And then he gets Thragar. Boom, fanfiction.
I don't-
writing it.
I don't know if I want Diamond King Thrall. But like,
Yeah, we need Thrall to be blue. That's what we need. Blue Thrall.
oh,
What I
no.
think about is the fact that if they had this plan to explore his elemental dysfunction, what would be the place that it would make the most sense to explore that in? I think like probably the Root Lands, right? With the Harenir. And if we, there's folks out there that think that maybe we're not getting a lot of Harenir content and like it was cut, So what would that say for Thrall's plot line? Like that's rough.
I do wonder if he got cut because that's one of my biggest issues with War Within is like, where is he? What's going on with that? What was the purpose of propping up Thrall just to take him away and go like, I'm gonna go recruit the Horde and the Alliance with Jaina. We're gonna have our own little side adventure in a really good book, a really good audio drama, and that's it.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk
If
about the
I-
Horde in the War Within, because this was ostensibly about the faction divide, right? So, is the Horde not in the War Within enough?
Well, actually, I've got one thing I want to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
real quick.
No.
If I had to guess on like what Thrall's going to end up doing in the World Soul Saga, I think they're very much setting him up to be like him versus Iridicron. Like that, those are the two that are gonna
Oh.
beef the most. Because one, Thrall's whole thing in Cataclysm was he replaced the Earth aspect. Like he's a shaman. Like, and Iridicron's an Earth dragon. Like they're gonna have a shaman off. Also Primalists is like Iridicron's whole thing. Shamans. So like give Thrall the shaman thing. Also Thrall is the one that kicked Deathwing's ass, and like Iridicron is gonna be like, oh god.
I mean, I'm for that. I thought that
know.
Dragonflight kind of.
There's a lot of parallels between Iridicron and Thrall.
I'd be down with that. I just figured they were gonna do that with Rathian because they really had that be Rathian's like epilogue in Dragonflight. They were like, I'm gonna go hunt down Iridicron, and like I think that's a really cool.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have like Black Dragons and Thrall teaming up, and like that's a renowned track for the Last Titan, baby. Is like the Earthen Ring, and it's Black Dragons and Thrall. And
this is just B talking, just because I'm not the biggest Abyssian fan. I'm sorry, Abyssian fans out there. I wouldn't be shocked if their reaction to the backlash of Abyssian being the Earth aspect, or the Earth Warder, is he dies and gives it to Rathian in his dying moments or something.
They Vol'jin him?
Sure.
They're gonna Vol'jin him. They make him the aspect and they kill him the next time he shows up.
He's a boring...
I just want to point out, Abyssian was not a good pick for the Black Dragon aspect when Khono, the extensive I want more Horde things, is mad that a Tauren got picked over
Rathian's just
like Rathian.
I'm sorry, but the arc was perfect for Rathian.
That was his whole point.
Like,
yeah,
I'm not an Abyssian fan. I'm not. He's boring. I'm sorry. It should have been.
I like Abyssian, but I think that like making him the Earth aspect kind of spits on his character, because his whole thing is that like he's not a Black Dragon. He's a High Mountain.
Yeah.
Tauren. He kind of abandoned his people to go like obviously the Dragonflight story did tackle that, like he needs to like join his actual people and he knows he can't ignore them, but like no, that was his whole thing, is he's like he loves the High Mountain Tauren, he's gonna go hang out with them.
I thought his whole point was to be like an advisor for Rathian, who was like Sibelian and Rathian and Abyssian, like it's basically like Sibelian and Abyssian are Rathian's guides, like advisors, because Rathian's so young, and they would have like elevated him, and that would have been perfect. Like I was like for Sibelian at the start to kind of be the aspect, but then as the Aberrus story went along, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm okay with Sibelian stepping down. But then they were like, oh, Rathian's gonna step down too, and I was like, what? No, it's Rathian's moment. What are you doing? No, this and like I what I hate about Abyssian's arc was like, you need to do more stuff, and I was like, yeah, he does need to do more stuff, and they reward him for it. They were like, let's reward him for not being involved. That's what it was, and I was like, no, he needs to be involved, and that's why I'm kind of like, if they ever do anything with him, he needs to be either involved or he needs to die. I'm mean towards Abyssian. I feel bad.
All right, but to put a pin in the whole Dragonflight, and we're still not over that.
Yeah.
Let's before I derailed us, let's go back to probably what this episode's whole theme is. 45 minutes in, we're getting to it.
Oof.
Is the whole Horde and the War Within, and because Khono, I'm sure you could just go on and on about it, and I'm kind of on the record. We actually did for the your podcast with Box. Talked about this at one point. That was like just after the leveling campaign. Now we're deep into Undermine.
Yeah.
I'm on the record of basically being like, I just don't care, which, isn't the best opinion to have. But as someone who's just not a very faction oriented person, I'm very like character focused. Like I view Anduin as Anduin. I don't, the Alliance is a thing that exists corollary to his character. I don't view him as an Alliance character. Like when people go for the Alliance, I don't go, yeah. I'm just like, okay, yeah, okay, that is the team I'm on, I guess. So like when it comes to like War Within storytelling, this is the stuff that I like the most. Is like when it's all just like the factions are a thing that exist because like it's part of the world building, but it's not like core to the storytelling. Like Legion is my favorite version of factions existing. Is like the main story has nothing to do with the Alliance and Horde. We're focused on fighting the Legion, but the Alliance and Horde are the two biggest militaries on the planet. So obviously they're important and they beef. And so far, War Within is really good at that. Like, I like how after the leveling campaign, the armies arrive and they're just like, shit talking each other on the beach. But it's like, yeah, they're here. The two major, superpowers of the world. So that's why I'm basically like no notes when it comes to War Within. But I know Horde people specifically do not share that.
It is interesting you bring up the Legion thing, because that's another expansion where I'm like, man, I like everything going on here, but there's not enough Horde characters here doing anything. Like, I was especially mad when it came to both Tuma Sargeras and Argus, that we really didn't have, like, I don't know, like Sarfang or an orc character address, oh, Kil'jaeden's dead, the guy who ruined us. Yeah, no orcs. Okay, we're gonna go visit Broxigar's grave. That would have been a perfect, like, stay a while and listen between Sarfang and that, and we never got that either. And I was like, okay, this is frustrating. War Within kind of is that too, where it's like, okay, there's no Horde characters, there's no orc characters, anything really. I just listing orc characters because orcs are my favorite, but like, I think what I liked about Dragonflight was, like, they took moments of, like, again, Heritage Questlands really helped out with, like, fixing that, because it's like, okay, let's take a break to focus on the orcs and the humans, and then go back to dragon stuff. I think that's what War Within kind of needed, I guess, where it would have been nice to have breaks to focus on, oh, let's go see what Lillian Voss is up to in the Nerubian place. So we got one quest with her. Thrall, he helps out the Earthen Lady, I guess. It's for me, it's just not enough, especially when you, like, line it up with Illyria, Dogron, Magni, Moira. You start noticing, like, all these very Alliance adjacent characters doing things, and you're like, okay, well, where's Thrall? Is he gonna do a thing yet? Okay, no. It becomes more apparent when you start noticing that, and for us Horde people, we just want to be seen and represented and heard and have something for us, because, like, I like Illyria, I like Anduin, but those aren't my characters that I'm, like, here for, and it's frustrating, and it's been like that since Shadowlands.
I'm with you. I think, like, I don't want to see Horde representation if it's like tokenism, where it's like, oh, well, we've been telling a lot of stories from characters that are Alliance coded, so to even the scales, let's, get some random Horde characters in here also. I only want them to talk when they have something to say. And so I think that, like, having Lillian in there and, like, even Thrall's representation is like that. I feel like that could have been almost anyone. That didn't have to be Lillian or Thrall.
Yeah.
But, like, the War Within, this is the part that gets me. Like, it just drives me fucking crazy. For one, and maybe the story will be told later, but the Haranir are so very obviously, like, troll adjacent. Why aren't any troll characters coming up and being like, who the fuck are you? Like, why aren't we having that conversation? And more importantly to me, the entire World Soul saga is surrounded around the idea that the spirit of our planet, the feminine spirit of our planet, is speaking to us and crying out in pain. Where the fuck are the Tauren? Because that is the Earth Mother. Like, why aren't we having them as part of the discussion?
Yeah.
Like, that is infuriating to me, because we're so focused on, like, the cosmic, like, void aspect of this, and that's why Ilaria is important. Well, the Earth Mother's talking to us. So where are the Tauren? It's driving me nuts.
So I have two little actuallys there. With the Haranir, actually, their existence is still a secret in lore. With Arena being the only one that has ever entered.
And I did
out.
say maybe
so
we will get to that storyline. I did mention we might get to it.
If we get to that storyline. The only people that know about the Haranir existing are the people that crashed in that Hollowfall ship with us. So, like, Andrew and Illyria, the player character, and a couple
and
of
Gazelle.
And the entirety of Undermine, because she went there too.
Yeah.
Well, now they, like, see her walking around and they're like, what is that? And that's about as far as we've got. So, like, we'll see. And the thing with the Tauren, they haven't done that, but also we did get Sunwalker Desco to show up in Hollowfall, which was cool.
But he doesn't really.
There's actually all three types of Horde Paladins show up in Hollowfall and talk about the light, but we actually did not get any human paladins talking about how Baladar kind of is weird for their religion.
To that point,
or dwarf or paladins.
It drives me nuts that Velen hasn't shown up to look at Veladar yet. I know he's busy.
Or Velen, yeah.
He's busy building, his new city. I get that. But there's a giant crystal that looks incredibly Naru. It may not be Naru, but like it looks Naru. Where the hell is
it does
Velen?
look
He
very
needs to show up.
It does look very Naru based. That is like one of the first things I jump to.
You think Velen would like sense it?
Yeah.
He would know it exists.
Say something about it. I mean, like, the fact that it's light and shadow also fits really well with his character, because they even confirmed that Velen is no longer just a holy priest, he's a disciplined priest now. Believe they outright said that. They were like, ever since he saw what Zira did, he was like, I'm not comfortable with this. And they said that he was more of a disciplined priest. I think Anduin's that too.
Have we ever seen him use the void?
No, but I know that he, at the very least, he's not fully light embraced as he used to be, at least. He's not as the whole point with Illidan, their back and forth was like Velen was like, I'm not fully going to trust the light, which that's a perfect story to tackle whenever we do more stuff with the light and the void or whatever in Midnight or something. But I think that a lot of characters should be involved in the War Within, in fairness, like Bane, Rokon, especially Talanji. Ever since we had the BlizzCon teaser and they had Talanji just hanging out in the Harrenir hut, which was clearly a placeholder.
Yes.
That really bothered me because I got so hyped up to see Talanji again. And then
so this does tie into sort of like a kind of a problem I've had as someone who's now, I've been a very offline Warcraft enjoyer for a very long time. I only be tuned into what people say about the game when I started making content. Otherwise, I just played the game and I enjoyed it. And I watched the weekly reset. Something that I find frustrating is whenever people are always like, anytime anything comes out in World of Warcraft, people are just bringing up random characters that they're like, this patch is a failure because it does not include this character. So, trying to think of a good example here. Like, people saying that War Within is a failure because, like, if we were to say that the entire expansion is bad because Velen didn't show up, I think whenever you have a setting like World of Warcraft with this, like, massive legacy, I just think it's, like, unreasonable to kind of expect that every relevant character is going to show up in relevant plot lines, because that would just create just a bad story that would be nonsense. I mean, it would just be too much going on.
As somebody who screams about, where's Rexxar, every minute, and at this point it's a joke, I agree with you, where it's like, if a character doesn't really make sense to be here, like, if I'm just saying, like, I want to see Rexxar, I want him to be relevant, and I say it's a bad expansion because he isn't there, that's silly. I don't even subscribe to the whole, like, Rexxar wasn't relevant in Battle for Azeroth that much, this is a bad expansion, even though he was in it, or something, I think it's more it's more of the carrot sort of situation where you put the carrot in front of me and you go, oh, hey, here's Thrall. He's going to do something in War Within, maybe, because they heavily advertise him. He's in the cinematic, right? I think it's more of that situation where it's like they tease that the character is going to do something and then they don't. I think that's more where the frustration comes in. And like Talanji, that's where her stuff came in because they used her as a placeholder, and I think that was a mistake. Because they probably should have just used some random troll character instead, and that probably would have been maybe better received. I have no idea if that was originally supposed to be her.
I think that's...
But...
like, the issue I have with the reaction to Talanji is that I'm just imagining being in Blizzard's shoes here, and that you're just using a placeholder for a placeholder, and a trailer happens to catch this placeholder in the back of the camera, and now you've got Twitter at your throat because you, like, falsely advertised Talanji being in War Within, when it's just some random placeholder in the background. It's this sort of just, like, intense emotional investment in a character showing up that I think is just... It's very, like, it makes me dislike being a Warcraft fan online a lot of the time, It's like we're being mad about something that is not a real thing. Like, we saw a placeholder in the background of a shot of a trailer, and now we're all very
getting mad about
it.
something that we ourselves made up.
Yeah. Jay, you actually have a lot of, like, moderating experience in the community. Like, you probably are in the front lines of this more than anyone. Do you have anything to say about, like, have you noticed any sort of, like, shift in vibes, the way that people talk about like devs and other players?
Um, yeah, I think so. I think that there's kind of two camps a little bit. There's like an old guard and a young guard. I know, we all know that Blizzard went through a pretty tumultuous time for a lot of different reasons. And I think that they came out the other side very much a new and different company. And I think that, it would be easy for a company to want to rebrand themselves in this way and to do it in a false way. But I genuinely believe that actual positive change has happened. And I think that there's a lot of people in the community that want to give the grace to Blizzard and enter this new sort of like joyous, optimistic, phase of Blizzard and Warcraft's life. And I see in the communities that I inhabit a lot of that energy, and I'm thankful for it. There are people who hold on to those old ways, the old mentality of toxicity and begrudging Blizzard and the WoW devs. Um, One of the biggest divides, I might get in trouble for this one. One of the biggest divides is classic servers and classic players. I'm not out to say that all classic players have this toxic mentality, but I will pretty confidently say that those who do have this toxic mentality tend to be classic players. I think that they found their favorite version of WoW, which is good. I'm glad that they found that, but they are inclined to sort of beat up on the version that they don't like. It's this new form of toxic tribalism that has always existed in WoW since its inception. It just used to be Alliance versus Horde, which has always been kind of a fun thing as long as you let it be fun. But there are people who have always taken it a bit too far and have made it part of their actual identity to be like, I love the Horde, and if you don't, then fuck you. Like,
Yeah.
and that's never been good. Like I've always been an Alliance boy, and I've liked teasing my Horde counterparts, but it's never been malicious. It's just been fun, and now I like them both. But I think that people have taken sort of that what developed into toxicity in sort of the early / mid years of WoW's life cycle, and it's hardened into actual toxicity, and now it's lobbied at Blizzard, it's lobbied at retail, it's lobbied in every direction. But again, like I said, for people who actively play retail, who inhabit these spaces, I've actually seen a lot more positivity than I have negativity lately, which is something we kind of talked about in last episode. But yeah, that's me.
I have noticed as someone, like, now that I make videos, like, a thing that has sort of started to really bother me is you'll have a lot of comments that like genuinely engage with the video, offer critique, positive, negative, and then almost every WoW video, and I've started going through comments on other WoW videos to see if this happens, and it does, is just people popping in purely to say that you're stupid for playing retail.
Yeah.
Like I always get a decent chunk of comments every video, no matter what it's about, is basically saying is that like WoW is dead and you're dumb for still playing it. And it's like, it's kind of tiring. But I kind of want to circle back on something there about how like Blizzard has changed. And that's kind of something I want to dig into there is like, Blizzard is, you're kind of like Schrodinger's Blizzard here, where like they are either the pre-Shadowlands Blizzard or the post-Shadowlands Blizzard, depending on how you feel about them at the moment. And my favorite example of this is the way that people critique Dragonflight storytelling and like how it was quote unquote soft. Because you'll have one crowd that'll be like, oh, Dragonflight is so soft because Blizzard didn't want to get canceled because they're all a bunch of evil people. And so they didn't want to do anything that could be viewed as bad. Or what is the verifiable reality, the Blizzard devs that, didn't get fired because they weren't monsters probably didn't want to write that stuff at that moment because they just been through some stuff, Blizzard just kind of needed a chill expansion. But depending on how you feel about Dragonflight's story, you're going to talk about one version of Blizzard or not. Like Blizzard is either still the company full of Afrasiabis and people going to Revendreth, or it's you know, the Ant Stickneys and Holly Longdale of just like the new Blizzard that is, you know, grown past that. Is like people will just flip flop between which one it is depending on their mood.
I think there's a little bit of middle ground there, and I don't necessarily disagree with that take, but I also think that just sort of the reality, I do think that Dragonflight storytelling was soft, and I think it actually might have been a little too soft for me. And I'm not one of those guys that typically says things like that. And I think the reason for that, I mean, like there may have been sort of this meta reason, you know, like internally, but also it's just a simple fact that Shadowlands was an incredibly dark expansion, just like a relentlessly dark expansion in terms of aesthetic and style. And so they probably wanted to course correct a little bit and say, let's lighten the mood a little bit. Let's do something a little bit more fun. And I think they went too far, just like they kind of went too far in Shadowlands, and it was just like endlessly bleak, and now it's endlessly campy, you know, like Saturday morning cartoon friendship, you know. But it was definitely a course correction that I think they felt they needed to make in terms of tone, you know. And now I feel like The War Within is kind of that happy medium where we still have a lot of that lighthearted goofiness, but we're dealing with some pretty heavy shit too. And so War Within is kind of where I like seeing Warcraft be.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with that. I mean, I liked Dragonflight, but I also thought it was a little too campy sometimes, so I kind of fit in that little happy middle of where I enjoyed it, but I also acknowledge that it definitely course corrected, which course correction does happen a lot with WoW at the moment. It's funny we're talking about the Horde and the Alliance. I kind of feel like they've course corrected since Battle for Azeroth, as an example, where, you know, the big issue was, oh, they're focusing way too much on the Horde and the Alliance. Let's take a break to focus on some other stuff. And I think that's kind of where we've landed at in the current era of WoW, where it's like, I think we've done it too far, just a bit. That's how I feel.
I would actually push back on that a bit, is because like Shadowlands and Dragonflight had like nothing to do with the factions. But I do think people understate how much the factions play a role in War Within. Like we have like the Stromguard short story. We have the Beachfront with like Torellian and Gaera. We have the Sons of Lothar reunion, and then also what's his name just showing up in that comic. It was funny. But then you also have Undermine, where you have Gazlo and Renzik being the dynamic duo. Like factions are once again like an intrinsic part of the setting. Like the story is not about factions, but as part of proper world building, the influence is always going to be there.
It's we're getting back to it, I'd say, with War Within. Like it's a gentle push back to how things used to be, kind of, but we're not there yet. And I think that they can like push a little bit further is my critique, probably. Because like one of the things I didn't like about Undermine personally, again, this is me, I really was hoping we would have had some more acknowledgments of like the goblins in the Horde and like the Bilgewater Cartel and like the Gob Squad and all this other stuff.
I think one bit of lore building in Undermine that I dislike is the idea, like they just randomly said, oh, the Bilgewater and Undermine is like not really part of the Bilgewater of Outside. It's kind of like I
didn't like
a
that
satellite organization. Like that's weird. This is a contrived thing so that Alliance players can join the Bilgewater Cartel for renown. Like the Bilgewater's the Horde one. That's what they are.
Personally,
you know?
This is just me again, just my own little interjections. I think that if they were that afraid to let Bilgewater, let the Alliance, you know, play with them, they should have developed the new cartel. Actually, this was outright in Renzik's short story, so it would have worked personally for me, where you have Renzik's cartel be the Alliance cartel, and the Bilgewater be the Horde cartel. And like, yeah, some Horde players could get upset that we can't, like, I guess, you know, unlock the Alliance's version. I mean, you could still associate with them. I don't know. If we can...
Well, the new cartel in Undermine could just be like the Union. Like there's like a cartel that's in temporary truce between the Alliance and Horde cartel, and it's like you.
But like you still,
renown,
in my opinion, like you would still tackle the stuff with the Bilgewater. Like it would still be like, here's the Alliance, here's the Horde showing up, in the story. Because like that's one thing I really miss on like. Had like in Battle for Azeroth, especially like in Najtar, you had the Alliance camp and you had the Horde camp, like the Unshackled and the Jinyu. I really miss having stuff like that, where it's like separate enough, but the stories are still pretty similar. Like that way you could still kind of like do that. I just miss that personally. Like that's
Yeah, I do like how Gallywix and like Gazlo do talk about the
It's like
Horde.
the one line we get.
You
That's
know,
the
is like
one line we get, and I miss that. I want that more. Like, it's a really good line. I love the line where Gallywix is like, "The Horde made you soft."
do Horde players go to the Westfall Lighthouse after the
Yes.
campaign, or is
No,
that just
that's
an Alliance
everybody.
thing?
It's
Okay.
it's part of my issue with Undermine. Again, it feels like you interact with mostly the Alliance after the story. I really wish we would have had like so I wish that the Alliance got that forensic and Shaw, and then the Horde would have gotten like, I don't know, Thrall talking about Gallywix and installing him as the leader, because I really wish they talked about that more. They never really address it, and I really want them to address it, and I think that would have been a nice little like is for what's to come, I guess. I don't know. I just really want them to do stuff with Horde characters and Alliance characters. I know that might be a lot to ask, but I'm not asking for the Alliance to be removed like people assume. That's not what I'm asking for at all.
There is like a sort of like oopsie in world building that they've done, where like Gazlo abdicated becoming the new like head honcho, but he still is the one that led the revolution and is now like on the table of the four cartels. And that would mean that the Horde now has like a solid relationship with Undermine specifically.
Yeah.
And I wish we got some sort of storytelling about like oh, Thrall shows up and he's like, I'm so glad for you, Gazlo. Maybe we should celebrate this by, making one of those little rocket tunnels go to Orgrimmar. And then maybe having like Tyrellian show up and be like, no. Now in the SI7 now suddenly becoming more involved in Undermine politics. Just like a little bit of that,
Yeah.
just a little bit of, nothing major, just a bit of push and pull.
I honestly think it would have been a nice little like story. It doesn't need to be a huge part of the patch, but it would have been really nice if we got like a side story where it's Gazlo outright asking the Bilgewater that are in Undermine to like, hey, so there's this Horde faction that I want you to kind of get familiar with if they aren't familiar with. It should be, honestly, considering the history of the world, but alright. But I think it would have been a nice little like recruitment thing where like Gazlo is like reaching out, and I think that would also been good for Gazlo's character too, because he essentially is this guy who became Trade Prince only because Gallywix left. And that could have been like a nice story to follow up with, because like Gallywix could have been like, nah, you guys are still a part of my business, because he could have basically pretended that he was still the Trade Prince. Like, how would they know? Like, that's the thing. Like, it's like,
yeah, if the Undermine branch is separate from the outside branch, why isn't Gallywix in charge of the Bilgewater?
He totally could have done that.
That's actually a kind of a plot hole.
Like, that feels like,
because yeah, they wanted to avoid the Bilgewater of Undermine being connected to the Horde one, so that the Alliance players could still sign up for the Renown. But yeah, you just pointed out there, the only reason he's not in charge of Bilgewater is because Thrall said so. And it's like, the Undermine ones he's still their boss. He's still there. Why would Gallywix would have to, on purpose, give up control of the Undermine Bilgewater?
Because I know
and respect Gallywix's authority.
Because Gazlo basically was like, I want nothing to do with Undermine. Here's my buddy, I forget his name. He dies in the cinematic.
Laszlo
Overbite. Yeah. Laszlo sounds like Gazlo, and I always think it's funny that he kind of just picked a guy that sounds like his name just to make it easier thing for everyone. But like,
oh, and the only thing he ever did in the story was like speak out.
Yeah.
His name is literally Overbite.
Yeah. Cheeky Blizzard.
He bit off more than he could chew.
I just think that they could have played with that idea more of like Gallywix being like, nah. You guys work for me still. And like Laszlo says something along the lines of, no, Gazlo's in charge, and like Gallywix is like, who's Gallywix? He's some nobody from Ratchet. And like it would have been like, I think that's what they could have played with more in the zone, where it's like Gallywix is kind of just trying to be the king of all cartels, and that would have been a nice way to like play with it, that the Bilgewater has to work for him because they still think he's in charge, and they would learn, oh no, it's this Gazlo guy and he's actually pretty nice, and oh, there's this Horde? We should maybe think about joining this Horde place. It sounds pretty nice. That'd be a nice little, I don't know, nod to the Horde, I guess. I need these nods to the Horde to make myself feel more, I guess, in the game, because I don't feel like the Horde is really in the narrative as much, and it's frustrating.
As kind of a contrast to that, though, so like I'm more of an Alliance guy, right? and I'm playing through Undermine, which is, some could argue is a quote unquote Horde patch. I would
Yeah,
disagree with
same.
that. And Renzik is like supposed to be the Alliance stand-in, right? They found the one Alliance goblin, and they're like, here's your guy, so you feel represented. And honestly, like, as a Alliance player, I'm sitting there as like, yeah, he didn't have to be here. Like, Blizzard, you can trust me to be interested in things. I don't need a guy wearing an Alliance tabard to care about a story. Like, that's kind of like I Renzik was a character that like kind of existed on the fringes of the lore, and I do have to wonder if like Renzik's entire involvement in Undermine was because they're like, oh, they're worried that like Alliance players
It's
are like eat Goblin
very
Patch. And I
yeah.
will say those fears aren't unfounded, because I do have a friend that is very, very like deep in the Alliance camp, and he is not playing this patch because he hates goblins. So like, it's not unfounded, but personally, I'm like, Blizzard, you can trust me. Like, I'm here for Warcraft.
I think it's interesting because like from the Horde point of view, the Horde feels even worse off because you have Shaw getting involved, and like there's no aftermath story for the Horde in that retrospect. Like it's all about Renzik. And like I like that Shaw comes for Renzik, and I like that moment, but then everyone was pointing out, hey, we didn't get that for any of the Horde characters. And I was like, oh, you're right. I don't like that. It's when someone points that out to you, it becomes a glaring issue. And like, I do think that's kind of part of War Within's issue as well, where it feels, if it felt the need to keep Renzik as a thing, but like they didn't think about the Horde at all because they figured Undermine would be Horde enough. I don't know, because like I don't even think Undermine is a Horde patch at all. Like it's a Goblin patch, 100%. But a Horde patch?
I think it is a Horde patch the way that War Within launch is an Alliance patch. Like, Blizzard is just really worried that it's going to alienate Alliance players because it's focused on a Horde race, like goblins. And that's something that, like... so I think the reason it doesn't feel like a Horde patch is because they did so many active decisions to de-Hordify
Yeah, exactly.
it, because they were worried about that Alliance reaction to it. And it is kind of like a mirror to the War Within launch. Except the War Within launch, like, it did, like, I don't know, it's like an interesting relationship there of, like, what things did the War Within launch do to de-alliance itself, and the Undermine did to de-Horde itself. But, a lot of Horde players feel disenfranchised with the launch, but they also feel disenfranchised with the Undermine.
Yeah.
It's like, what are the differences between those patches where...
I think it all just has to do with character.
It didn't work for them.
I think it's just character. Because like Gazlo even feels less Horde than usual, and it's just very weird, like how they just handled a lot of it. And I think that, again, as I will continue to say, I think they just need to bite the bullet and let Alliance and Horde characters do stuff again together. And I don't know. It's there's no easy way to fix it, an easy way to put it, because I know like you'll hear me say that and you'll go, well, what do you mean by that? Because like Roll still did stuff, but he really doesn't do a lot, and that's the main thing. Like, I just want the same equivalency to, like, what Anduin got. His arc was amazing. I loved it. But then I'm, like, looking over here, like, okay, I really want the same for Thrall and other characters, and Gazlo's arc was good, but it felt off. Especially,
Local stories. Local stories. That's where we need to put these things. Sorry, I've been stewing on this for a bit.
Yeah.
Like... going back to my thought of the Tauren, right, and talking about the Earth Mother, I'm not saying that Sunwalker, Desco, and Bane need to be like on the box. They don't need to be in the cutscenes and constantly asking about the Earth Mother. But having like a local story quest line in, I don't know, the Ringing Deeps, and then one in Azkahed as you get deeper or whatever, where there's this little group of Tauren that are like, hey, the Radiant Song, that's the Earth Mother, right? Let's check this out. And they're just little quests that are not part of the MSQ. They're not part of the main story, but they exist in the world. And it's Blizzard saying, yes, we are aware that this is something that the Tauren would be into. Here they are. And like local stories, in my opinion, they don't need to be random no-name NPCs. We could have Thrall's exploration of his problem with the elements as a local story that progresses through the quest line, and then we're getting that representation, but it doesn't have to be like, this is the Horde expansion now. It's just We're letting
Yeah.
these players or letting these characters tell their stories in their own quiet space. That's actually optional. You know, you could totally ignore it if you wanted to. I don't know why you would want to, but you could.
That's
You
a
know, and
I think there's a bit of precedence there because you also do just have like remember the Sunwalkers in Pandora?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That's a great
They're
example.
like, oh, Anshe led us here, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, like we're here because like the Alliance and Horde Warfront, and the Sunwalkers are like, oh, we're not here for that. Like,
Yeah.
we're here because
There's
like a
a-
For
religion.
sure, that's
there's a perfect example of that in the last expansion we had with Dragonflight, which was the Bane questline. And as far as I know, a lot of Horde players
Mhm.
love this. I loved it too for a lot of reasons because it also had the Founders of Durotar reunion after 19 years next week afterwards, which I was teased on by Blizzard employees at the time. They were like, "You're gonna love something coming up," and I was like, "Huh?" But it was fully voice acted. Well, not fully voice acted. I'm sorry. It was only voice acted for the cutscenes, but we had cutscenes for it, and that made it felt bigger than it was. Enough for me to go, "Ooh, I really like this," because it's a Bane moment, and it's Bane acting. I wouldn't say out of character. A lot of people were saying he was acting out of character, but no, he was traumatized by the centaur. It's totally justified in the way he was acting. But like, it was a really good quest line, and it was, Horde enough basically to make Horde players happy. And if they did more stuff like that throughout an expansion, I think that a lot more Horde players would be a little bit more settled and not as frustrated as they are right now, because we're not getting any of that in War Within like we got in Dragonflight, which is like really telling, I guess. So
yeah.
Yeah. So I want to point two things out. One is kind of a meme, and then two is back on subject. But one, you mentioned the centaur thing, and there was a cut hour-long discussion about how Kalimdor Centaur from like I think episode number 3, there was like an hour-long talk about how
Yeah.
like Kalimdor Centaur and Dragon Isle Centaur have no relation to each other in the
Yeah.
lore, and they probably should. That just like maybe just didn't get included. They decided against it, and because of that, that just makes Bane very racist. Like he's just like out here killing centaur because they kind of
Well-
look like the ones that he doesn't like when they have no
he's not
connection.
just killing them because they are centaur. He's killing them because they killed Bovan, who saved him as a kid when he was captured by centaur who were going to eat him, and raided and killed and all this other stuff. So and like these are bad centaur. They're evil. They are outright killing everybody, including nice centaur. So it's fine.
I do think that there's a little bit of racism in there, but that's kind of the point, right? Like,
Well,
he's motivated by
Yeah,
that.
just like
yeah.
funny-
I mean, he gets over his. He's not a Garrosh character where he stays racist. He learns, oh, it's wrong for me to see centaur as just this. There are good centaur out there.
What's funny is like you could say like, oh, he learns that like there's more depth to their culture and he comes to understand them, but because they're not connected, really what Bane learns is that like what you find out is he just hates horse people. Like that's as deep as it goes. He doesn't like talk about like, oh, like I don't like their culture. It encourages like depravity and barbarism, like the way the Alliance talks about the Horde. Instead, it's just like, oh man, those quadrupeds, like, because that's the only thing that ties these two people is their horse.
Horses and cows are natural enemies. I'm a zookeeper. I would know. You can't argue me.
It's the centaur and Dragonflight are weird because they
What are
it's
they?
like-
Yeah,
they existed somehow before the centaur of Therzane somehow, and then
because they're just not connected. There is no connection between the two people.
I don't
They are just
I
happen
don't
to
know
both
what they
be
were
horse people.
thinking. Like, does Newser? I have questions. Like that doesn't make any sense. Just you could have just said that they somehow found the Dragon Isles thanks to the bird, Onara.
We're falling back down the centaur rabbit hole.
Yeah. Okay.
They're the leading podcast in talking about centaurs.
The second thing that I want to talk about that kind of brings us back on topic is I really love the Dragon Maw Orc questline from Dragonflight.
Ooh.
Like that's a great example of like a local story. Like because as a Horde player, you're gonna be sitting on these Dragon Isles and be like, man, this might be awkward if I like headcanon my Orc Hunter as a Dragon Maw Orc or
That's
something.
a really-
It's like I hope I get a story that talks
That's
about
such
this.
a really good quest line too. I think that was made by the same person who helped made the Orc Heritage quest line. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they were. Which is sad because they left Blizzard after they did the Orc Heritage quest line, which makes me very sad.
Ooh.
That's like peak Heritage quest line, and they even included the buddy of the Dragonmaw Orc there. I believe he's a Blackrock Orc. He's not even a part of the Dragonmaw, but he was like, my buddy that died in the Waking Shore or whatever, like the pools, he would have loved this. Like that's basically what he says. Because like the new leader of the Dragonmaw Orcs outright says that they're no longer gonna, follow that practice of like abusing dragons and, forcing them to do shit. Like they're not doing that anymore.
You know what it's like? It's like being at a party, and it's like a party where you don't really know anybody, but like they're all having a good time and they seem like good people. You're happy to be there and hang out with them. And then like you see your people like in the corner, and like you pour a drink and you go over and it's just like, these guys, am I right? Like that's what these like in an alliance expansion, having these little Horde side stories. It's like finding your people at that party.
It's like the Draenei and WoD.
Yeah, it helps.
Like you go on Draenor, you're like, oh, I know the Go people. I'll go hang out with
It
them.
really just helps make everyone feel welcomed, and like that's the main thing. Like WoW, at the end of the day, it's for the Alliance and the Horde. At the end of the day, like there are two factions, there's two player bases. If you appeal to both, they'll be happy. You have a happy player base. Now, obviously, there'll always be somebody who's bad and like, hey, that guy over there got 2 cakes. I only got 1 cake. This is BS. And then I'm over here like, I got at least 1 cake. I'm happy, I guess,
I think, there's, like we talked about earlier, like on Twitter and stuff, there's a lot of like conspiracies out there about how like the Blizz devs are actually all like just Alliance fans and they hate the Horde or whatever. And I think, now that we've been talking about this and going through kind of the history of it, I think the real thing here is I actually made a video and talked about this, is that WoW storytelling has just become like way more A-plot, character driven. And I think that they just haven't figured out how to adapt that to like faction stuff yet. Like right now, the way that the Ward Soul Saga works is it's just way, way more focused on the main campaign and one story thread. And they just haven't found their footing yet on how to like make factions feel included in that environment. And they'll figure it out. I think that's just kind of like the reality of it. We're just in a specific moment of storytelling where like they're still adapting to it. Like, how do you make Alliance and Horde players feel equally involved when you're telling a singular high budget? Like,
I will say like stuff like Heartlands really helped keep that alive in a way, even if it was an audio drama, even if it was like a side story. It was really nice to just have that. Like it embodied Warcraft, It's got...
Oh yeah, this is the leading podcast and saying Blizzard should just do short stories all the
time. Yeah, I'm for that.
Just all the time. Because like, if you can't afford the budget to do like a whole Tauren side quest, I don't know, have a writer write a Tauren short story.
Especially with the audio drama.
Like, it's not even connected to the main plot. It's just a short story about a Tauren coming to Khazalgar. And
love the Legion audio dramas because it helped, spoon feed what was going to happen later on in the expansion. Like Heartlands, I 100% think is going to bleed into Midnight or future expansion X at some point with Marin as a major threat. And
I don't think so, but I really do think Heartlands was just great at expanding on like how does the Alliance and Horde look in like the modern world. And I do think that Heartlands was really good at establishing, because if you ask around, a very popular opinion that I share is that like I don't want a faction war anymore, but I really want like local conflicts that we get involved in. So let's say there's like in Season Discovery, there's the one Night Elf that is like, we were stupid to join the Alliance. I hate the Horde. Like I hate everyone. Is like, I hope maybe one day we just get a story about like Night Elves and Orcs fighting over trees again. And it's not the Alliance and Horde. It's specifically like this like one lumber camp of Orcs fighting with a splinter group of Night Elves. Or like we had in Stromgarde, you have specifically the Makar Orcs spatting with the Stromgarde humans. And I like how the Stromgarde humans have been fashioned as like the the tradition, like Warcraft 1-2 style humans, and the Magheart orcs are your old school Warcraft 1-2 orcs, and they're just going to be permanently fighting, especially in a game where battlegrounds exist. Like now, Stromgarde can have a battleground, and it's just like, oh yeah, the those orcs and humans are just always skirmishing a little bit, like that's like their thing. And you can do that without the Alliance and Horde going into full global war.
Yeah.
You can have just a feral pack of Worgen that have been attacking some Forsaken in Lordaeron.
Yeah, Ivar's still a thing out there, and he still does not seem that happy about anything really. I think there's a lot of stories that they can still tell where there's conflicts. It's just that it's small conflicts that if they are left unchecked, they can bubble. That's one of the main things and why Meryn needed to be stopped was because she could have stopped the ceasefire. That Sarfang died for. That's the Thrall's words about it. That's why he was so.
There's an interesting relationship there that I really love too. Of like, in that story, you're never really worried about the ceasefire genuinely breaking, because like all of the quote unquote people in charge, all the people at top, like they're just great friends with each other. Like Jaina and Thrall, they will never go to war against each other again. They're over it. But Meryn and Gera, no, they do not know each other. They will hate each other. There's a lot of bad blood there. So like those local skirmishes can still happen. I'm sure your random Westfall farmer is still turbo racist against orcs, even though Anduin and Jaina, their leaders, like, probably grab lunch with Thrall every once in a while. Every Tuesday they go to Waffle
I think
House. So there's just an interesting relationship there of like when Thrall and Jaina are talking to each other, they're just like frustrated and they just wish their people would get along like the way they do. And it's like, you can, that like strenuous relationship, you can genuinely keep that status quo for 40 years of storytelling and tell whatever story you want without engaging in a battle for Azeroth level 5th war.
Yeah, that's where I basically stand if they ever do like quote unquote faction versus faction storylines like that, where it's not a massive thing like the Fourth War was, and like maybe they can do that story again someday. I don't think anytime soon, realistically, but like I like those small skirmishes. I also just like it when the Horde and the Alliance team up and do a Wrathgate together. That's, again, like I said earlier, that just is what I'm really appealed by when they do stuff like that, which
I guarantee you Midnight opens with a broken shore.
I honestly
like an Alliance and Horde, the full
I think
armies.
That's another thing, like War Within is kind of like the black sheep of this saga, where like it's entirely new stuff mostly, while both Last Titan and Midnight are like returning to old lands and doing this stuff. And like I think Midnight specifically, it makes the most sense for us to have Alliance and Horde storylines there. Like obviously it's gonna be Elf Town for a while, but I do perceive at the very least that the Alliance and the Horde will come together to defend Silvermoon. That just makes sense to do, especially the Horde.
Speaking of Midnight, I do want to say, as Alliance and Horde people and neutral, Jay, what color do you guys think they're going to repaint Silvermoon again in Midnight? As sort of a joke question, maybe to wrap this up. Because I'm thinking, like, are we going to have the red quarter, the blue quarter, and then, like, maybe a silver quarter of Silvermoon, Are we going to have a separate faction hub? How do we think that it's going to look, being
I think that they might have an Alliance embassy established by Eretor, maybe? I could see that, and then I could also see them being like, here's an Alliance section for the High Elves at some point, like, as the story progresses, like, and then maybe they paint it white or something, or blue, I don't know what they want, what Verisa wants. I mean, she might be like, let's paint it purple for Ronan or something,
I just have a specific just love for how Thalassian elves, be them High, Void, or Blood, the first thing they do if they have any sort of cultural shift, the very first thing they do before anything else is establish fashion aesthetics. Like the Void Elves, they got like twisted by this dark, corruptive ritual. And the first thing they did is they're like, okay, guys, purple and gold. No more blue and gold. That was High Elves. And the red and gold, that's out. That's Horde stuff. Okay, we're going to be purple and gold. Also, we're going to wear way less clothes for some reason. Like, The first thing that any of these elves do, or like the blood elves, they're like, we're Horde now. What's the first thing we should do? We should repaint the entire city red. Like, we lost like 90% of our population. Do we ever have the budget for that? Yes. Paint the city red.
I love that because you can even see in like the one Illyria short that they did, if you look in the background, Silvermoon is blue or whatever there. And in Warcraft 3 Reforged or whatever, they made Silvermoon like blue as well. So like it is in canon then that they were so dedicated to joining this new faction that they were just like, hey, so let's just make everything red with like one spell or something. Because like you had like the ruins there that are red too, so that means that they probably did some kind of spell or something that just transformed everything blue to red or something. It's just funny.
No. I like to think that during the Purge of Dalaran, the reason Lorthar was so upset was not because Jaina was killing the Sun Reavers or anything. No, it's because he had just ordered all the blue paint because they're about to join the Alliance again.
We didn't even get to the Purge of Dalaran. We're going to have to do a second episode of this because I didn't get to talk about how the Purge of Dalaran, Jaina was right. And
what?
I didn't even get to talk about how much I hate.
You do not want to.
I didn't even get to talk about how much I hate the Forsaken because I hate the Forsaken. There's so much more we can talk about. We got to do a second episode of this.
I think we should wrap up there just so that gets no context in Twitter.
You are not.
Alive. You're going to learn what Horde Twitter is.
You're not getting context for either of those comments until we do the second episode.
Oh my god.
So there's your hook to listen to the second episode.
Oh, yeah, Khono, thanks for being here, by the way. We needed some Horde rep around
For
here.
the Horde.
I know, Jay's making it uncomfortable. It's okay. I've already filed the paperwork and everything. He will be removed. It's okay.
Next episode, it's just going to be Six and Kona, like I never existed.
I hate the Forsaken, and Jaina was right about the Purge is a very...
My man.
Oh, actually, no, we're cutting. That's where the episode ends. It's just been saying that.
You're making me look bad.